Hello everyone, my name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
Today we have part 2 of the conversation we had with Bob and Shannon Gentry and Lisa Mills, who's Linnea's mom, from last week's episode. By the way, before we get started, I just wanted to mention several people have commented that they're being unsubscribed by YouTube. They do this every once in a while. Out of the blue, they just start unsubscribing people. So make sure you check below if you're still subscribed to Dive Talk, especially if you're enjoying this series where we're talking about Linnea Mills. Please go ahead and subscribe and like this video and share it also with people. But, other than that, this episode, we weren't planning on recording it in 2 parts. It was actually supposed to be a conversation that was like an hour long. I know you had like a time stop. You said I only have like an hour. David, who also joined us, the attorney for the Mills family, he was also like, I'm only going to be there for like an hour. And we ended up talking for like 2 hours. So we were like, okay, let's just split this in 2.
Yes, and part 2 is riveting. If you thought part 1 was riveting, part 2 is riveting. But you heard us talk a lot about references to the video of Linnea's actual death during the episode.
Right.
And it was captured by Bob's GoPro. We are not going to show that.
We don't have it.
And we don't have it, and we
Right.
haven't seen it, and we're not going to show it, and it's not really the purpose to show it. What is important is that Bob is going to tell you the actions that he took, what happened during this, how did he try to save her, and the aftermath of this tragedy.
Correct.
That's what we're going to focus on. You're going to be shocked. I'm not going to give away too much, but you are going to be shocked. And I know you know what I'm talking about, of one very big part that we really didn't touch on too much in the first hour.
Right.
And you're going to hear me ask a very big question at the very end. And I don't have that answer to this moment. I cannot understand it.
Yeah.
It's not what you may think. So
It's mind-blowing.
You need to watch it. It blows my mind.
Yeah. The other question that we got a lot on episode 1 or part 1 was whatever happened to Debbie Snow, the instructor, right? Is she in jail? Is she like in death row? Like what's going on, right? It's clearly negligence. Like what happened to her? Well, we get to answer that question in this part as well.
Do you want to recap a little?
Yeah.
To remind people?
So in case you missed part 1, I would recommend you go back and watch part 1. But if you watched part 1 days ago, maybe a week ago, and you kind of trying to remember what happened, Bob was talking about how his daughter was struggling with clearing his ears. And Debbie, who's the instructor again, was pulling her down and forcing her. And she didn't think that Emma, who is Bob's daughter, had enough weight. So she was stuffing rocks in her, pockets and like trying to pull her down or whatever.
Which
she
in
got
itself
frustrated.
is dangerous, by the way.
Super
Very
dangerous. She got frustrated. So she told Emma, hey, you know what? Just get out, go get warm. Like, we'll try later. Like she just got fed up with it. So then she turned her attention to Linnea and Bob as they start planning the dive where Linnea lost her life. And that's where Bob picks up the story.
Watch to the end, because the end has a very big question mark that I'm struggling to understand.
So the dive is about to start in earnest, and I think Debbie dropped her flashlight and about 15 feet of water, and everybody but me, I don't know if Linnea went down, but everybody's down on the bottom looking for whatever Debbie lost. I think it was a flashlight. And I'm thinking to myself, they're crawling around on the bottom and kicking up the sediment. How are you going to find what you're looking for? Because you're just going to cloud it up. I couldn't understand what they were trying to achieve, so I wasn't going to go down and add to the mess. I don't know if they found it or not, but they returned to the surface, and we kind of gathered at the beach. Seth Liston asked Debbie if he could, do some pre-planned thing about him and Nathan going on their own and doing their own dive, and it sounded like a fairly deep dive. And so they left, and still no designation of what, but there's 3 of us. So I'm sorry, odd man out. We're all 3 together. And that's just it. It's all 3 together. And so for me, I've always been kind of the shepherding kind of guy when with my dive partners and in a group, I tend to want to be in the back, usually a little higher, and kind of having an eye on everybody. I tend to have a pretty calm sense of demeanor, and it's just where I prefer to be. And so I put myself in that position. Linnea is to my left and below me, and Debbie Snow is in front of us. Well, I got to back up just a second. As Nathan and Seth leave, she pulls out, or Debbie Snow pulls out her compass, and she states that we're going to be navigating this particular compass course or bearing. And she's got the compass, and I'm like, I'm a Drysuit student, so my compass is broke. So I guess this isn't, this is for her requirements. So I asked it. So that's the other reason why when we took off, I kind of let it so that you know uh, um, Linnea would be closer to Debbie, but Debbie was out front. So I don't know how the heck she was teaching anything to anybody or observing her demonstrating any skills in the course that she was in. So I'm following. And at this point in time, this is about the end of my real accurate memory. My memory from this point is a bit edited simply from being mentally overwhelmed for what comes. Now, what I'm stating is there is no addition to reality. Whatever the video shows, I'm not going to be adding things that didn't happen. I'm going to be making statements that are missing key parts because that's how I remember it. I do know of the actual reality, and I can fill that in, but I want you to understand it from first from my perspective of how it all laid out from what I actually I remember. So that taking and starting this bearing and following um, Debbie, and I wasn't necessarily following Linnea. She was a little bit ahead, but she was below me, and I could see her. And I would glance down at her, but I don't have a real clear memory from that until where it really starts to fall apart. Like I say, my brain kind of edited it. So I get to the point. I've been watching my depth gauge, and I'm at that point at like 42 feet, and I look over and I see Linnea, and something's wrong. In my mind, something is wrong. I can't figure it out. It's like there's something wrong, but what is it? And maybe I didn't see air bubbles, or maybe something else was supposedly triggering my sense of, hey, there's something wrong here. And Linnea listfully reaches for me like I need help. And so it dawns on, oh, she needs help. So I go to reach for her. And as I approach her, she just disappears. And I chase her down, and I catch up to her. And when I catch up to her, I approach her over her left shoulder. I swing around in front of her, and in my left hand, I grab her right BCD strap and pull her close to me. And I immediately grab my regulator and try to give her air. Her regulator's out of her mouth, but she can't breathe. Um, she's not going to be able to breathe. But at that moment, I wasn't thinking about her being crushed. I wasn't even thinking about her a suit squeeze or any of that. As I was looking at it, is that she, for some reason, didn't have a regulator in her mouth, and she wasn't breathing. So I tried to give her my regulator. In desperation, I even hit the purge valve to try to force some air in. Nothing. Then her her eyes begin to close, and you can see her eyes rolling, and she's unconscious, basically gone. And at that point, the stress level goes right through the roof. I was stressed when I reached for her, but I became really stressed because what's going through my mind is 30 to 60 seconds in this condition, I got to get her to the surface or she can't revive on her own. And if she can't revive on her own, usually it's only a 20% chance of reviving somebody that is in this circumstance. Even if I had gotten her up and she wouldn't have self-revived, it's only 20% chance that you're going to revive her even then. And more time is just not a good thing. And that's when it really hit me. I was in a bad way. She was in a bad way. And I had to figure out what to do. So I grabbed her BCD fill auto filler, and I'm pressing it. I'm getting nothing. It's not doing anything. And I'm thinking I've been certified since 1980, and I've owned most of the time 3 sets of equipment because I provide them to my buddy divers because they didn't have the money. And so I had all sorts of different kind of equipment, and it's not a mystery what's on the end of that BCD hose. And but in that interim, you're always second guessing yourself. Was I hitting the right button? What? So I gave up on that and I tried to fill it manually. And every time that I would blow into it, it would just blow out. And I'm thinking, how is this broken? I didn't realize that my lips were so cold that I couldn't seal around the mouthpiece. I was thinking that, well, there's something broke on the valve. So, then I gave up and I started looking for, weights or some way to get her up. And the panic had gotten to the level at that point of she's gonna, if something's not happened real fast, she's gonna die. And I just couldn't take it. And I had to leave her at the bottom. When I caught up to her, I glanced at my depth gauge. I was at 94 feet. I did not know that we were actually drifting down. So I didn't know actually what my real bottom time or my maximum depth was. But as I left in a panic, I was rising pretty quick and it all had to come back to me. So I started watching my bubbles and I began to spin looking for Debbie on the way up. We needed help and I had no idea where she had went. And I get to the surface, about 15 to 20 seconds goes by and she appears to the southeast by at least 50 or more feet. She was quite a ways away from me and Linnea. I yelled that, hey, the young lady is drowned. And she's like, what? I says, the young lady's drowned. She's right below me. She goes, well, we got to I got to get a tank. And then she starts yelling to Seth Liston and I'm cramping like crazy. Cause once I couldn't get her weights off, I was actually trying to just power lift her and I couldn't, she weighed 44 pounds negative with the weight. Her BCD had no flotation in it. And, I couldn't physically lift her with, what I was carrying. And so I swim in, I get to the beach. Seth is getting his stuff. Debbie's swimming in and they asked for tanks because they had both, she had exhausted her air and apparently Seth had exhausted his. So I run up to the truck and I grab a tank. I run back. I give it to Debbie. She's diving in. I brought a yoke tank. So I left the bottle there, run back up to the truck and grab a DIN bottle, bring it back and give it to her. And at that point, I mentally checked out. I didn't kind of check back in until they brought Linnea's body back to the beach. So I couldn't really tell you. All I do know is that my equipment was scattered everywhere, my daughter's equipment. So I kind of put that all in one spot on the tarp. So I think that's what I was kind of doing in the interim of Debbie leaving and coming back with Linnea. So the thing I want to go back now and tell you is that the video shows something different. And I know that that's what I was actually seeing. There was no ambiguity in my mind. I don't know why my mind edited it that way, but Linnea was giving the out of air sign in the video. And Debbie swims through the field of the camera and actually hits my camera with her fin, but she passes over Linnea's shoulder in that shot with her doing this. All she had to do was look down and see her giving that sign. She swims right on past her. And that's when my panic started, when I know then in my mind that she was couldn't breathe, was out of air, but my mind edited that out. So, I'm sure that I reacted much quicker than, gee, I wonder what's going on, because that's not really what happened in the film or in the video. So I know what really happened, but I don't remember it that way. And why that is, I don't. But the point is that everything that could have gone wrong went wrong this day, and Linnea was the biggest victim.
Man, it's yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Honestly, that's it's it's tough. I mean, there's a lot to dissect there, and you I said it before hearing it from your words, and I'm going to say it again, man. I mean, you really gave it your all. I would be honored to be your dive buddy. Seriously, anytime. I hope we can dive together because you're just a good human being that cares. That's what you are. That's what we need to be in diving. That's what diving is all about. So you actually epitomize the example of what we want in a dive buddy. And everything went wrong. It starts with it starts at the very, 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 very moment that somebody told, your poor daughter to, you know, buy a dry suit. I mean, it's back to the beginning stuff. And one factual part I didn't understand. Was she out of air? Because you mentioned that you hit the low pressure inflator as to try to bring her up, and nothing came out of.
She was never.
She was never out of air.
Never was.
Yeah.
It was suit squeeze.
It was purely. So I just want to clarify that this was related to the dry suit.
What she was indicating, it seems like, is I can't breathe.
Yeah.
Not that I'm out of air. It's just I can't breathe.
But what happened in the moment that you were hitting the dry suit inflator? Do you think it was adding air, but she was so overweighted that it actually wasn't having any effect?
She was overweighted. Her suit couldn't take any air because there was no hose hooked up. So her BCD would only lift 25 pounds. She was carrying 44. So even if I had gotten the BCD filled, she would have still been 20 or not 20, but 19 pounds overweight, beyond what the BCD would lift. So without finding the weights, how do it sounds like, oh, it's only 19 pounds, but when I have no lift other than what's counteracting my weights, I've only got maybe an additional positive of, at that depth, I only got another additional positive, and say with my BCD is probably 7 pounds. And I never even thought, once you go into panic, this is my introductory to a dry suit. That was not on. It's not like part of muscle memory. When I was in the Navy, you train you train 50 times to do the same evolution over and over and over and over. And when it really happened, you just would go do it. You didn't have to think about it. You go, this and this and this and this, and it happens.
Right. And you're right. And you mentioned earlier that, people leaving comments below. By the way, if you have anything negative to say about this, send them to me directly. Yeah. Don't post them below because you're going to be gone. But you said it before that people they have 800 dives in a dry suit. They are, quick to jump and be like, well, how come he didn't do this or that? You were in a dry suit class. You were a brand new diver and you were stressed out. In my opinion, I don't think you did anything wrong. Anything you missed.
And Gus, if I can say.
Sure.
I mean, as Linnea's mother, I can't, Bob, you are a hero. Like the fact that you were there with her final moments, she could see someone was paying attention to her. Thank you.
For sure.
And we'll talk about that. We have something to say about that later. But tumbling deeper and deeper in the dark, I mean, the fact that you put your own life at risk to try to save my daughter, and you are family for life. And I'm telling you, Linnea knew you were there and trying.
For sure.
Definitely.
And David,
Eh,
did you mention earlier that the inflation hose in the dry suit was a non-standard like BCD inflation or whatever? It was a different connector?
Correct.
Okay, because that's some of the comments that we got the first time. Is like, how come he didn't just connect his own BCD hose to the? It wouldn't have fit. It
It's a
wouldn't have
long,
worked.
it's a
It
long
fit.
nipple. It's a long nipple connector, not the short standard sport diving connector.
Okay.
And I don't think we said this, Debbie, the instructor, how long had she been teaching, and was she a dry suit instructor?
I'll let David answer that one.
She was a certified instructor for about 7 months. She did have her dry suit or PADI dry suit instructor certification. It was an add-on. She failed her first instructor development course. She was allowed to retake the parts of the test that she didn't pass. And when she went back for the retake at Rainbow Reef in the Keys, they added on 5 specialties, including dry suit specialty.
Yeah, they
And,
do that often.
Wow.
Yeah.
Had she had a lot of dry suit, do you guys know, experience herself?
She had been a diver in Washington State. So she had experience with a dry suit. I don't know how much experience she had with a dry suit. Going back to how much experience she had as an instructor, I think she had only certified about a dozen students by this time. And one of the things that I believe was happening, we were going to show this at trial, was they were trying to get Gull Dive elevated to a 5-star PADI facility. And to do that, you have to issue a certain number of specialty certifications, a certain number of open water, advanced open water. She actually issued 7 certifications for this dive, this fatal dive of Linnea. She certified.
Unreal.
But she had only really taught, I think, 5 days before, and she had to be rescued by a student in one of the earlier courses. She was getting ready to have hip surgery.
What? So
Wow.
that speaks for itself, and there's so many standards broken. The dive computer, from what I understand, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, somehow did it end up in the hands of PADI and it was not turned in as evidence? Can you help clarify that whole
Let's talk
dive
about the
computer
aftermath.
evidence introduction? Because I'm confused on that.
Let me take you through the timeline. Linnea's body is brought to shore. She's wearing a compass on one wrist and a dive computer on the other. They were performing CPR on her, and it took nearly an hour for an ambulance to get there. They had to go 20 some miles just to get a signal to call one. Air ambulance landed and a ground ambulance came. By the time the medics got there, the dive computer was now taken off of her body, and it found its way into Debbie Snow's truck, and Debbie Snow brought it home with her. So the rest of her equipment went to the morgue with the body, and her personal effects, there's actually a photograph of her personal belongings on her chest before the body is taken away, and the dive computer's not there. And there's body cam video of Debbie standing over the body as they're doing CPR on it. So ends up in her truck. It goes to her home. The National Park Service, the initial investigation done by a very qualified investigator at Glacier National Park, he knows to retrieve the dive computer, find it. He thought it went to the morgue. He was replaced by 2 Yogi and Boo Boo, 2 of the least qualified, feckless investigators I've run across in 25 years. They went to Debbie's house to interview her, and she produced the dive computer and said, "Oh, here it is." And they said, "Is a transcript of this? Is that Linnea's dive computer?" "Yes." "Oh, is it downloadable?" "No." "Well, what does it show?" And they're not divers. There's a dive safety officer, an inspector for the Park Service. They stopped using it. There's a dive control board. They never used them. They had experts, they had NATO involved, and they had others involved. They stopped completely and ghosted them. went to her house. She shows them the display of the graph. It says that's all it shows. It's not downloadable. Oh, can you take a picture of that with your cell phone? So they took a picture with a cell phone and she airdropped it to the two investigators and they left it with her. And then after she told them this is all the information you can get from it, then it went to a lawyer who works with Patty, and he took it to California, and he had it with Debbie's and the other injured diver, all three computers. They went to California, where they remained for a year and a half.
Why?
And they were downloaded by the head of scientific diving at Scripps University, who was working as a consulting expert for this lawyer in LA, but they were never produced to us. We kept requesting them, and they were delays. We ended up filing a motion to compel in the court, and a year and a half later, they came back and said, we didn't know this lawyer was involved in the case. He told us, I'm not involved. I've been conflicted out. And the local lawyer in Missoula just stalled. We finally came time for an equipment inspection, and I sent you the correspondence between the attorneys where they said, oh, we sent that to you a year and a half ago. No, you didn't. Where are the computers? What kind of, and so anyway, we caught them. They had taken the evidence out of state and kept it for a year and a half. And so, you know, pretty important evidence. In all the lawsuits I've defended, dive computers are stolen off bodies all the time, and it's typical that the dive computers are stolen off the bodies. Wes Skiles, Rob Stewart, you know, all these times. But in this case, so we knew to look for it, and the initial investigators knew to look for it. But the second investigating team that came in and relieved them didn't know what it was, didn't know the significance of it, and believed Debbie when she said, you can't get any more information than this graph, which they didn't know how to read.
Well,
So,
did Patty know that their lawyer had the dive computer?
Yes.
They did. Okay.
Yes.
So I would ask Patty, why, I think maybe you're the biggest dive agency in the world, would you not want everybody to have the dive computer if your entire purpose of being a dive agency is to promote safe diving practices through your standards? Why would you not, in fact, be the advocate to turn that over? That's a question for Patty. We can let them answer that. I don't understand the motivation of why you would not be anxious for everybody to learn everything they possibly could to help prevent something like this to happen again. If you have a good answer, let us know, because I am struggling and I don't want diving to be portrayed as something where we would ever not want to make the number one priority safety. And that brings me to you.
Yeah. What do you think, Lisa?
Because Lisa, what do you want? What
Well-
do you really want from all of this, from this interview? And where do we go from here with you?
Okay. Well, you know, there's justice and then there's justice.
Yeah.
And part of my personal, I can only speak for myself on this, not Scott. We're no longer married, but we talk, you know, about Linnea. She's our daughter together. And Nick, our son, who's now a diver, by the way, and a darn good one. And I really believe that part of what justice is to have all the facts on the table so that everyone can learn from it. And I am 4 years into this today. So, you know, I can hear these stories. Like if you had even a year ago, I don't think I could be here, you know, yet. It takes time, but I feel that I want to keep Linnea alive in this way, and that there is meaning to her death, and that it will perhaps inform an industry that needed maybe a little course correction overall. And whether it be Patty specifically, or if there's drift towards money making over safety, if that's what's happening, I'm not a diver yet. I am very interested in diving though, and safety.
I want to dive with you.
Okay, and we will. Now, I am becoming a commercial boat captain, and that's what I'm working on. So,
Well, now I want to
I
dive
have
on your
my,
boat.
yes, so I have my interest in that to raise money for the Linnea Foundation. So that's my little plug. So that would be the other thing is I feel like her story has to be told until there's nothing left, no corner that's in the dark. And, and in that way, Linnea stays alive for me too, because I don't feel like we just gave up and went to heal. Everyone says, oh, you're glad you're healing because you're starting to feel better. I'm like, what's healing? Come on. Like, we're all traumatized and we will be the rest of our lives. I can tell you in some ways. And in other ways, I'm stronger. I'm stronger than ever. My son, I look at him, he is so resilient and strong. I spent 6 months in bed. I mean, I'm serious. It was pretty rough, but here I am. I also want a legacy. I come up from a family line. I could tell you a very quick story is my my great grandmother did not go on the ferry boat that sunk in New York in 1906. And that was that incident where 1,000 women, mostly women and children, died because of a fire and lack of safety codes and all, led to a lot of the regulations we have today for life vests, safety drills on boats, fire safety regulations. All I can say is somewhere in my lineage, these stories being told, my family paid for the land that the plot for those dead people is in New York. Somewhere in this story, I say, in my own ancestral lineage, is this need to push for safety. And how much has to do with then the deaths had to do with very parallel things to what happened to Linnea in a way, disregarding safety. Um, People not listening to each other, not a well coordinated plan for what to do in an emergency. Okay. So I want to see Linnea have a legacy, her name remembered, that her death caused positive change. And we'll never know how many lives get saved, how many parents won't have to mourn, right? But, oh, because things change. But my hope is that this is just the beginning of telling her story. We were fortunate. Some very strange stars lined up when my friend Kim Frank happened to be married to David Kincannon, a top expert in, these very kinds of cases. The other thing I'll leave you with two more things actually. One is, how is it fair? This is more of a question for you, Woody and Gus. How is it fair? How is the justice system fair when federal investigators don't collect all the evidence and put it into evidence? Like, how could a dive computer not be considered important enough to help determine the decision whether a case would be considered a federal case, a criminal case for gross negligence? I thought this was the epitome of the job description of a gross negligence case here when it comes to what happened to Linnea. I mean, look at it all. But you know what? We were told the Park Service didn't recommend that the criminal case go forward. And guess what? The feds said, I'm sorry, the Park Service investigator said to me and to Scott that it was actually what is it, the ADA? Is that what it's called?
AUSA,
Yeah,
Assistant U.S. Attorney.
yes, the U.S. Attorney's Office were the ones who decided not to move forward. So they're both pointing at each other saying, no, 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 we wanted this to go forward as a criminal case, but they didn't. And then and then I was told, oh, we don't know what happened to Linnea. I'm like, I even know what happened to Linnea. I looked at her body in the casket and they had so much makeup on it, I could still see where her carotid artery had squeezed and she was squeezed to death. I could tell that, and I have no expertise beyond working as a physical therapy aide. Okay, with the elderly, as far as medical experience and first aid training and CPR training. So how could they not know? How could a medical examiner not send the records over? How could they test Linnea's body for drugs and not, as a federal investigator, did not ask for Debbie Snow's medical records? How is that possible? And how is this fair?
And where does that criminal, if you will, liability end? Because I asked the question, Patty, why didn't you rush to turn over that dive computer? Who else
Well, and it feels to
should
me
be
that
criminally indicted here?
it feels to me that perhaps the computer wasn't the only thing here that they try to pull. Was there anything else that they did on their side? Because obviously they kept the computer for a year and a half, and it wasn't until by law they were forced to deliver it. It's not like, oops, oh, here it is. I found it. It wasn't off the goodness of their heart. So what else did they do?
Yeah.
In this case? Who else did they try to blame? Because I assume Goldiver did the same thing. They tried to pull up
Well, okay.
all kinds of moves.
Here's another one for you, if I may. David will give me the hairy eyeball if I get out of line here, but I'm going to say that after Linnea died, I thought, okay, I'm a forgiving person. I believe in redemption, second chances, and why didn't anyone call us to say we're sorry about your daughter? Like, not a soul. Not. I mean, I didn't hear. Do you know I wrote? You'll love this one. I wrote a message over email and a message via Facebook Messenger to Patty saying, "Hey, why is no mention of Linnea's death? She was in a Patty training. Are you all even aware?" You know what I got? A week later, I got a lawyer telling me you are no longer allowed to do anything to reach out to them. No. Okay.
Wow.
Like,
Well, there you have it.
like, no, my daughter's dead. I thought you would be interested in finding out why. Like, how? What happened? Someone tell me. Like, my daughter's gone and nobody even wants to send us flowers. Like, what the heck? So this is the hurt and the pain that's more like it's one thing to have an accident happen. It's another that everybody just wants to say, this isn't as important as a drug dealer. We tried drug prices when teens die all day long at the feds, but we really, this is not important enough to put our actual dive experts on. They're busy up in Glacier Bay, I was told, working on a case up there. Was sorry. So
That was not even true. Can I tell you one other thing?
Yeah.
This is critical. I'd like to give a shout out to Leanne Hires and Lamar Hires because they gave Lisa a pass to come to DEMA so that she could at least meet with people and hand out those purple buddy tags that you have. And they got reported to the DEMA authorities and got in trouble for having Lisa there. And DEMA came down on them and Leanne stood up to them. And
Well,
now those people who I love dearly have lost their son in a tragedy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but there are good people in the dive industry. I've been largely excommunicated from the dive industry, which I knew was going to happen, but I didn't care. There's some good, loyal people that will still have me as their attorney in the industry, but there's a lot of good people in the industry that understand that something had to change and that this could be a teachable moment, including Lamar and Leanne and you guys and others. I mean, you don't have to circle the wagons. There's enough here. I would not have defended the case if I had been asked to defend it. And if I was defending something like this, I wouldn't have defended it the way I was. The easiest defense Patty could have had in this case was to point their finger at the criminal and to encourage criminal charges being filed against Debbie Snow, and then stand behind the criminal and say, "Oh, look at her. She's under indictment." Or, that would have been the easiest thing for them to do, but they never did it. They never thought about it. They went in the other direction.
there is one more thing, if I may, David and
Please.
all of you. So back to after Linnea died and we were holding a service, we have a close relationship with people in the Himalayas. We were doing something with a Buddhist Lama from Tibet who was going to do a little ceremony. So I wanted to make sure the divers who had been on the dive, including Debbie Snow, were invited if they wanted to come. And I did so, and Debbie said, well, it's the pandemic. I'm having surgery on Monday for hip replacement. So I have another question is like, how can you be leading a dive of this seriousness if you're in so much pain that you're going in for total hip replacement surgery. And why aren't the medical records a factor? Why the feds? And isn't this an incomplete federal investigation without that? And isn't this, and without the dive computer? Do we not have a shot at pressing for the feds to at least consider all the evidence? Because I was there at the viewing of the evidence up at Glacier National Park, and I'm probably the first mother of a victim who ever insisted on coming, but I was there, and there was no dive computer, and there, there were no medical records for the instructor. Yet they took my daughter's phone in to get inside of it to see what were they investigating my daughter? Like,
Yeah,
and they tested her for drugs, but they don't even look at the actual instructor. So I just have to raise these questions because I'm not done with these fights, because the way we were treated too. We met with them and they were not nice in the room. And I'm going to tell you, there's no recording, but Scott and I were pretty dumbfounded by the treatment. And I'm telling you, we went out of there pretty disgusted. They were not kind to us, not in the least. And they basically told us tough cookies.
I mean, whether you agree or not with the fact that the case should be reopened or the all the evidence should be considered, like whether you agree with that or not, you have to agree that the fact that no one got even a slap on the wrist for this, it's mind-blowing to me. Like there's no consequences here.
Not even a parking ticket for parking on the beach.
It's insane. It's like nobody got anything out of this.
Could it be that the Park Service, and I used to work for the Park Service, so believe me, I love the National Park Service, but could it be also is there any conflict of interest when a federal agency and the federal government is part of, like, it could have been stopped right there just because they didn't have a commercial permit that day when the ranger came up? Well, okay, a mistake was made, but that maybe they don't want that to be known to the public. I don't know. What is it that made this so that they just called it off and said, there's no evidence, we can't tell what happened to your daughter, we can't tell how she died, and that was end, and we're closing this and it's not going to be pursued and it's over. And by the way, you have other options you can pursue. And I'm just like, what? So that's how I'll leave it. I'll just say I'd like to know what you all think.
I just want to ask this question. If they're so eager to cite somebody that gets out of their car and gets too close to a buffalo, what happened here? I mean, I think this is actually a loss of life. And
hey, there could have been multiple lives lost that night,
Yeah, but like, my point is that they, they'll pursue somebody that steps off the boardwalk, or they'll pursue and have them in trouble. They'll pursue somebody that gets too close to one of the animals or throws something to a bear or whatever. But this seems to me like, criminal negligence. That's just my opinion, but seems like it would be fair to have a serious, solid investigation that, I don't know what the Park Service's interests are, and maybe since they're investigating it, they're protecting their own interests, and maybe that's why they called it off. I don't know, just speculation there.
Look, I can tell you, if you read the transcript of Debbie Snow's interview by the two investigators from the Investigative Services Bureau, that's like they call themselves the FBI, the National Park Service, they actually tell her not to speak to the attorneys for her own attorney, or to me, or to our investigators. They advise her not to do that. And in addition to that, there is a procedure within the National Park Service for investigating diving fatalities. That's why they have a diving control board of experts. That's why they have a diving safety officers. And I know they told you they were busy on a fatality at another time, but that actually had occurred a year earlier. And I received personal apologies from people inside the National Park Service who were embarrassed by this. And I received phone calls from the people on the dive control board. That was being used by the lead investigator at Glacier National Park. He got replaced and he got benched and he got told, don't speak to anyone, you're out of it. We've got this now. And then those guys stopped. And in addition to that, their supervisor told me to tell Lisa and Scott to stop complaining about it. Stop being so critical.
Yeah.
And, Why
I mean-
don't they and I've talked to the U.S. Attorney's Office about this. I've talked to the assistant U.S. attorney who declined to prosecute. There is evidence. When we say they didn't look at evidence, it's not because it doesn't exist. It's because it exists and they didn't look at it. And they just haven't looked at it. And I said, look, have you looked at this? Did you know this? No. Did you know that? No. Did you know what a dive computer? No. Did you know? Well, and they said, if you have other information, we'll look at it. I said, I'm just giving it to you. And why don't you put it back into, there's no statute of limitations on homicide. Why don't you put it back into the process that you're supposed to use and have your own experts in your own agency look at it the way they're supposed to, the way they started to, and then take a recommendation from the people that know something about it. Not the two, Yogi and Boo Boo, who are telling witnesses, keep this evidence and don't talk to the knowledgeable people for you or your family or the family. Don't talk to your lawyer. Don't talk to their investigators. And it's in the transcripts. We got it pursuant to a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request. But 4 years and counting.
And I'm going to bring this back to you, Patty, because I'm really struggling with you right now with every single thing that's being discussed here. Why do you not want to help bring this evidence and bring this further? I don't understand that. This is your entire purpose. You only have one purpose, and that is to promote standards, to promote safe diving instruction and diving. So you should be spearheading. You should be raising your hand. We want to put everything out there of every single party in this. I can't think of somebody more that should be pushing forward on that than the largest scuba diving agency in the world. Otherwise, you know what you're doing? You're basically telling the world we don't really care about promoting safe diving practices, because if something happens, we're going to, well, I don't want to say what you may be thinking or not thinking, but it sure seems like, in my opinion, it seems like you aren't wanting to push this forward. Absolutely. In my opinion. And that 100%. Is weird.
And I would invite Patty to partner with our family. I mean, we would be, thrilled to sit down together and say, how can this be prevented? I mean, an 18-year-old who trusted in her instructor, what's wrong with this system? But you know what? I don't expect to hear from, but I will say the Linnea Foundation will continue to push for this with the dive tags, and we are going to do some good, and we're going to actually write the story in full. And at some point, we hope it will continue to inform. It would be really great. I was thinking, maybe there needs, like, young people also can be educated about how do you pick which dive agency you work with.
Great.
I was thinking it would be a great program that I could take the lead on. I'm a youth educator. I've done that my whole life in my career that I left after Linnea died because I really couldn't work anymore. That's a tough one after you lose a kid, is to actually function in a university position. But I'm real interested in this issue, and I wonder if maybe viewers would have ideas about how that might work. There are a lot of places where youth learn to dive, and how can they, if quality assurance isn't really assured, how can the consumer, especially youth that are entering, the numbers probably are, it's when you're young is when you start diving, most people, right? I would think. So it might be that a little bit of this needs to happen, and I'd be really excited to see that happen.
How about a Better Business Bureau, but it's just, completely independent, rates individual shops, rates individual programs, and if you want a good rating, but it would have to be somebody that is not in the industry. You can't have, Patty having representatives on it and being able, it's like having the UN in charge of civil rights across the globe, when half of the people that are in the leadership of that organization are, despots or a part of despot governments, that do all those things. So
conflict of interest.
But this is an amazing point. where is, or are they ever involved? The RSTC, which of course Patty is a major member of, and the ISO. Where are the worldwide organizations also on this? Why aren't they saying, Patty, why aren't you stepping up more? Like, do they do that kind of stuff, David? Is that, or do they
No,
just don't
They
do
do
that?
the opposite. They've actually signed an agreement that says they can't disparage other members of the industry. They can't criticize other members of the industry. So they
Well,
won't.
So
there goes our member.
So no,
unpoliced.
so no improvements can be made.
Right.
How come? Can
No.
I ask you a question? For skydiving, are there requirements and, legal requirements around safety? And is diving any more risky
question.
than skydiving? Like, are there industries we could compare to and kind of say, how would a consumer, would it be okay to go skydiving if you didn't require a checklist every single time for safety that the instructor was going to lead a skydive?
And if you go there to make videos of your kid, they probably invite you to skydive and hand you a parachute. Like, yeah, just go. Right.
Yeah.
Apparently,
Yeah,
that's cool.
Well,
Drysuit diving.
I gotta say this, because
Jeez.
there's something really interesting about this. It was a violation of training standards for Bob to be wearing a GoPro that day.
right.
But the fact that Bob was wearing a GoPro that day is the only reason we know what happened to Linnea Mills. I mean, and there's Bob's incomplete memory, and I've watched that video hundreds of times. I know why his memory is incomplete. I wish mine was.
Yeah.
But for the fact that he happened to be wearing a GoPro, the misinformation that was put into the medical records and into the coroner's records by the defendants, it would have looked as though Linnea panicked and drowned and floated to the bottom, because that's what they told the medical examiner. That's what the coroner's report said. And that came from the dive shop owner who wasn't there. And then that, we wouldn't know, and it would have been a mystery and just one of those things. But for the fact that one violation of standards actually worked in everybody's favor.
Amazing.
I mean, but
Wow.
here's something I need to say, like even something simple, like in the advanced open water course, under the PADI standards, it only requires indirect supervision, which means that the instructor doesn't even have to be in the water. They just have to be nearby.
Yeah.
But in the Drysuit course, it's required to be direct supervision.
Yep.
And that reconciliation never occurred. I mean, but they have never even changed the standard to say, don't teach Drysuit in advanced open water, or if you do, use direct supervision. It's a simple change. It's directly related to what happened here. But what Debbie Snow did was actually allowed under that standard.
Well, one thing to add that I'd like to add is that GoPro camera was never actually worn. I had it on a frame, and I never even paid attention to the camera. I was waiting for something interesting to pop up that I would video, and then maybe edit it later and just take that section, because I thought it was kind of boring what was happening. I just left it on so that it was ready, because it's really hard to turn it on. And, at the moment, I just let it run so that I could capture something that might come up that was great. And so I'm actually just carrying this stupid camera in my hand and using the two 1000 lumen lamps that I have on it as light. And I'm not really paying attention, even pointing the camera anywhere. So I've never watched it, but David, you watched it. How much is it obvious that I'm not really pointing it at anything? Or does it look like it's just capturing everything perfectly?
You accidentally pointed it in the right direction 95% of the time. There's one small piece that's not captured that's insignificant. Otherwise, you caught until the point at which you're trying to save Linnea's life.
That
At
it
that
should have been up
point-
against her chest.
Yeah, at that point, it's you're no longer focused on the camera or even accidentally. So, but it records everything, absolutely everything. There's
Wow.
no ambiguity about what is happening, and it's long. It's like 6 minutes long.
Yeah, all by accident.
Right.
Well, I think we should wrap up the episode. We're almost at 2 hours now. Is there anything you guys want to add, Lisa,
The
Bob,
only thing,
Shannon?
the only thing I would like to take just a moment. It is Linnea's death anniversary today. I call it angel anniversary, but it's I thought something positive we could do because this is a pretty heavy subject, but I did want to make an announcement. We have a foundation now in Linnea's name, the Linnea Foundation. And as of yesterday, my son, who's president of the foundation, Nick Mills, uh, the he put up the website. It's gone live. But if you want to sign up and get on our mailing list, I'd suggest that. But I do want to say that we have an announcement to make. The board has agreed to put funding towards a scholarship for a wilderness first responder student. And there's been a young lady who's been offered the position for training, and she's going to go forward. So we'll announce her name soon. But I want you to know that we're calling it the Robert Gentry Scholarship Program, and we hope to fund it year after year perpetually in honor of the man who was with Linnea and tried everything he could to save her life against all odds. But we love you, we appreciate you, and we honor you by seeing that future lives, well, the people have a chance because somebody has training out there, and it might be in a different circumstance. It might just be road accidents or other things that this young woman does. But I will say, you are a hero, and we thank you for everything you tried. You risked your own life for my daughter who you did not know.
Definitely.
And we thank you.
Well, this interview is probably more motivated out of, uh, it's not a story I want to tell, but it's a story I feel I should tell to honor Linnea and who she is and what she stood for, and sort of make up for the fact that I was unsuccessful. So, like I say, it's not a fun subject, and it's not something I enjoy recalling, but um, I I am honored that you would extend that to me. I really don't know what to say, but I thank you.
We'll just pay it forward in Linnea's name and in yours. Uh, yours for being a hero. Thank you.
David, anything you want to add?
Guys, I kind of sit on the side of the room with you. I hate the fact that I didn't get to know this young woman even for a moment before she died. I do know these families very, very well. I care about them deeply. I love them. I've seen a tremendous amount of pain, a tremendous amount of courage. They've shown leadership, and I'm proud to be associated with them. I'm grateful that I could help them in some small way, and I continue to be proud of them. I just, there's the only good that will come from this young woman whose life ended too soon is what you see today, and the results of that and the memory, and even what you two are doing, Gus and Woody. This is helping, and it matters. And so, thank you to everyone, and just carry on, please.
Will do.
David, I want to tell you thanks for your extended say counsel and advice even after the case is over. I mean, it just shows that how much you care, and how much that it's affected you also to continue this. And I just want to say thank you from my family for all the support, both through all the legal trappings and after. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob. We're still going to ride together,
All right. Sounds good to me.
Woody, anything you want to add?
And I will go out on Lisa's boat.
Yeah. Yeah, we're Calmer Waters is launching our first trips. So we will be running charters and raising funds on those charters for the Linnea Foundation. So join us on a 68-foot Hatteras. We'll go to the Bahamas and South Florida and have some good times watching for dolphins for Linnea.
Perfect.
We got to go.
Well, I'll just end by I've said this often. I don't know why Gus and I somehow have the privilege to be this medium in diving. I don't know why. And I don't know why it happened to be that directly today on the 4th anniversary, which was not planned, that this would happen. So I can only say that this is the purpose of Dive Talk. This is why I do Dive Talk, is to hopefully we've got to do better. We've got to care as human beings about each other. It's not just diving, it's really in the world right now. And, I'm really sorry this happened. It's a bad representation of what it wasn't like this. It wasn't like this early on. Patty, you weren't, I know how you were in the very, very beginnings. And we got to do better. I mean, you got to care about people's lives like that. And that's just how I would want to end this because we just have to. It's critical or diving isn't going to continue.
Absolutely. And I am again very thankful for all of you for being here. And I think these stories that we continue to share in the channel help other people. You mentioned Lisa earlier, it prevents other parents from mourning in the future and from other tragedies from happening. So thank you all for being here and thank you all for watching this special, I guess, episode. It's been a long time coming and we're really, really happy that it happened and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everybody.